I sat in the tiny room in the same-day surgery unit, working on a crochet project to keep my hands busy. My husband Galen was in surgery to have his uvula removed, and I was waiting for the doctor to come and speak with me. There seemed to be no real cause for concern. In December 2009, Galen asked me to check his throat, and his uvula, that dangly thing at the back of your throat, appeared to be swollen. He saw his doctor on December 21st, who referred him to Dr. Griffith, an ear, nose, and throat specialist. He saw Galen on January 6, 2010, and while he wasn't concerned about it, he did recommend removing the uvula. Surgery was scheduled for January 21st. About an hour and a half after Galen was taken to surgery, Dr. Griffith entered the room. He sat down and we chatted for a few minutes. I was still unaware that my life was about to change. Dr. Griffith stood up and reached into a cupboard where he removed an unopened box of Kleenex. I remember thinking to myself, why is he doing that? Now we're going to have to pay for it. As he opened the box, he told me that while he hadn't been concerned about Galen's uvula, they tested it during surgery and it was cancer. He seemed sincerely sorry that he had to tell me the news. When I heard the word cancer, I felt as though everything around me disappeared. Dr. Griffith informed me that the reason he didn't think it would be cancer was because Galen had none of the behaviors. He had never smoked or used any kind of tobacco products. He was strong and healthy, and he had no other symptoms. Dr. Griffith spent a few more minutes with me, informing me that we had a long road ahead and that things were going to move very quickly on the medical side, as this appeared to be a very aggressive form of cancer. When Dr. Griffith left, I found myself standing in the middle of that tiny room, and I couldn't hear anything, even though I was in the middle of a busy hospital. I felt as though I couldn't breathe. I called my mom and said, "It's cancer," and she replied, "I'll be right there," even though she was nearly an hour away. I then called my brother, the person who had introduced me to Galen, and asked him to come. I decided to go to the lobby to meet him. As I started down the long hall, the tears came. I wasn't sobbing or making any noise, but the tears just poured down my face of their own volition. There were many people around, as it was a busy day in a large hospital, but it seemed as though everything was in slow motion and almost as though I was invisible. My life had just been turned upside down, yet life continued as usual all around me. It was the most surreal experience I've ever had. When Galen returned from the recovery room, we held hands and promised each other we would fight and we would win. We'd faced tough times before, and this was just another bump in the road. Unfortunately, it turned out to be a bit more than a bump. It was truly the fight of a lifetime. Galen had to have chemotherapy and radiation for what was determined to be stage 4 cancer. On February 11th, Galen was admitted to the hospital for surgery to get a feeding tube. He also had a port put in his chest for medicines and blood work, and he had to have 7 teeth removed in preparation for the radiation treatment. Our oncologist, Dr. Pro, told us right from the beginning that around weeks 2 to 3 into the treatment, Galen would have to be admitted to the hospital. He was admitted to the hospital 2.5 weeks after starting treatment and spent the next 32 days in the hospital, only leaving his room to go to his radiation treatments via wheelchair. After being discharged, Galen spent 9 tough days at home and then was readmitted. At that point, his body was shutting down. It had had enough. One of the nurses informed me that he was in critical condition and he might not make it. I sat in his room and I held his hand. He wasn't conscious most of the time, but when he was in terrible pain. Since starting treatment, he had lost 120 pounds, he could no longer talk, and he was very weak. I told him that I would be okay and that our boys would be okay, but in my head I was screaming, "Please don't leave me." I just sat and watched him for hours, thinking of all of the wonderful memories and good times. It was the most difficult time in my life, but at the same time it was one of the most special, and I've never felt more connected to someone. The doctors were very aggressive, and after blood transfusions and shots to boost his white blood cells, he started to turn the corner. After a few more days in the hospital, Galen was able to come home. My husband fought hard through his treatment, but even harder during what we call the summer of recovery. At first, he could only walk to the end of the driveway, but every day we were able to go a little bit farther. In late August, after being off for 8 months, he returned to work part-time. By October, he was back on his regular shift, You never know how you're going to respond to a crisis, no matter what kind it is, medical or anything. But having my 41-year-old husband diagnosed with cancer on January 21st, 2010, and his valiant fight and continued survival has been nothing short of a miracle. We just passed the 3-year mark, and Galen remains cancer-free. And for that and all of the wonderful people in our lives that helped us get through that difficult time, we are truly thankful and we feel very blessed. Thank you.